And Mila, if you could continue to address the attendees and get them up on the panel, ideally. James Huang hopefully will be here. Hi, everybody. I'm Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. This is our weekly FDI forum, foreign direct investment. I see Teresa Mueller is here, and I'll probably go to you first before I go to John. I want to recognize that this triangle that this event represents between economic development, business, and real estate. Teresa is part of one of those legs on the real estate side. You've been, Teresa, to FIAPSI here recently, and you're always a globetrotter. You've got all sorts of deals going on here, there, and everywhere. What's going on in your world before we start talking about Cuba? What's going on in Chicago?
Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at. I'm actually in Portugal right now, and specifically Lisbon. He had mentioned Portugal, and at the moment I'm at the Ritz. I just had the most amazing buffet lunch here. Um, I'm coming to the SOR event. If anyone's not familiar, that's Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. But I did just go to Vienna for FIAPSI, which I encourage all global practitioners, whatever your discipline, to go to at least one of the FIAPSI events per year. There's always major four events held throughout the world, and always the second week of March in Cannes for MIPIM. So yeah, I'm here representing because I have a lot of hotels, multifamily, resorts in Caribbean and Latin America. So even though this is not my exact tribe, it made sense since I was here anyway, just down the road for the FIAPSI event. But thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I'm always willing to connect anyone who's looking to do anything global.
So the SIOR conference is coming up, right? Do you know when is that? You know where
Well, that's
you're going.
this is the international one. So it's
Oh,
being held in Lisbon right now. So there are several. There was another SIOR event that just happened
I
not
see.
so long ago in the US. But yeah, they have regular events as well, but this is the international one. Of course,
Got
CCIM, SOR, a lot of those things that stem from the US don't have as much presence internationally, but the big players do show up to these events internationally.
Okay, because I know Paul Danks, and you may know Paul Danks, right, out of London with
Hmm.
SIOR, and he
Yeah.
and Jim Huang are meeting up here soon, I think, in the next couple weeks. And so, great. So, congratulations on that. When do you get back to Chicago?
I come back this weekend. I've been here for several weeks, and it'll be nice to sleep in my own bed again next week.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad you had a good breakfast, and you're right down the street from John, who's our keynote speaker today. We're going to be talking about Cuba from Portugal, and I know Paula is also joining us here today to talk a little bit about living in Portugal and what that's all about. How does that work? But John Board is our speaker today. Um, uh, we know him quite well because he was part of Global Chamber in the early days. In fact, even before Global Chamber was around, I've known John. He had set up just a spectacular life in a place called Tubac, Arizona, which is between Tucson and the border. Nogales is the actual city, and it's a great place. And in fact, I just remembered Elvira's. John took me to this Mexican restaurant called Elvira's, and I will say it was probably one of the more dangerous drives I've ever done back from there home. I should probably have just pulled over and got a hotel. But I opened my windows and I sang to myself and I stayed awake. It was less about being too much alcohol. It was just being very tired and having a long day around the border, having a wonderful dinner with John, and then recognizing that, wow, I'm really tired. How am I going to get home? Because it was about two, three, probably about 3 hour drive north to North Scottsdale from there. But I made it and was inspired by John, as I always am, because he's so passionate about other cultures. He's passionate about Mexico. He's passionate about the unique culture of Tucson, and now living in Portugal, he's passionate about Portugal, loves to ride his bike there and do business from there. he's always also had a passion for Cuba. And in addition to that, he has connections there. He has a lot of knowledge there. He's going to be sharing today information about opportunities. If this happens, then maybe we should be thinking about this. And in the meantime, here are some ways to be connected to the region. So, John, thank you for a long time friendship. Thank you for
Okay.
always being an inspiration to me. And thank you for speaking today. We look forward to learning more.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Yeah, we go back many years, many great conversations. So nice to have one more on the books. When I talked to Myra, she was going to pull up the slides, or do you want me to share? Or
Sure. Mila, is that available? It looks like it is. Here it
all right,
comes.
yes, excellent, excellent. Well, let's get started. And really happy to share some perspectives on Cuba. I've traveled to Cuba 8 times from the United States. I have family in Cuba, friends all over Cuba. So in the last 9 years, it's just been a life-changing experience, really understanding Cuba. And that's what I want to really start out with today. So our agenda on the next slide, really first need to just show you some photos of Cuba so you understand the people, understand the country. These people are isolated, facing hardships, understand their life, their soul. It's a very vibrant country. And more than 1 million people have left the country. And in Cuba, the government really relies on those people that have left to send money back. That drives their economy. So with over 60 years of sanctions, there's just a lot of moving parts. And there's also some underground parts. So it's really unique. So I want to just show you a little bit life in Cuba, share some photos, brief introduction on that, then get into the current economic context, what the restrictions are today, and they do change. Also, what the post-sanctions environment look like, what some priority investment segments are, some roadmaps, short, mid, long term, and some risks. And I've also put together a couple PDFs. So those could be dropped into chat, or the Global Chamber can send those out to folks that attend. One is a very great article of just understanding change in Cuba. And the other is just really a lot of media resources and government websites so that you can stay in tune with all the moving parts of Cuba. So let's take a look at what does Cuba look like today. So life in Cuba, there's a soul, a heart, a happiness in the face of government, the military, and the sanctions. These people, all they've known, they've knew freedom before, and then life with sanctions and life under a communist dictatorship. There's creativity in trying to make a living. There's creativity in trying to cook without electricity, but there's elegance at the capital. And there's a much different life for the people and families of the government or military. So, for example, the auto license plates are designated with certain initials so that you don't get stopped by the police when you're on the road. If you're military, government, or family related to those folks, you go through. If you're not, you get stopped. If you are a common person in Cuba and the police or military found out that you had beef in your freezer, you would be arrested and go to prison. That's only for the military and for the government. Next. There's happiness, there's a future, there's a longing for hope. The students on a field trip to the castle, the cigar roller, this is their life. But there's an opulence when you're in Havana. Havana has everything. And the reality is, it takes creativity to make a living. Selling flowers by the cathedral, selling fruit across from my family's home, or sharpening knives using the gears of a bike to spin the blade. And this is the reality. This is Cuba today. This is what sanctions do. And this is Cuba at night, typical night. You can go 20, 30, or more hours without electricity. It rotates around the country. You may get 30 minutes, you may get 2 hours, you never know. But you live in complete darkness, in stress, without being able to cook, having your food go rotten. It's incredibly stressful. It's a hot island, humid. It's unsafe at night. There is no electricity. There is no fuel. But in the day, it's different. This is a typical tourist resort. However, that's changing too. The Emilia brand out of Spain just shuttered its hotels due to sanctions. With those sanctions, the Cuban people don't work. Their average weekly salary at working 6 days at a hotel is $5 for working 6 days. If you go to the market and are lucky enough to find 1 liter of oil, that is about $18. So nearly a month's worth of salary if you spend nothing else for 1 bottle of oil. That's Cuba. So with my family in Santiago, since there isn't much to do during the day or night, they asked me to bring some games on my last visit. And living close to Mexico, went down and bought some games in Spanish. They understood Uno a little bit better than they understood Monopoly. They both work for the government. May Ellen works in human resources. Natalia works in customs. So I was challenged, how do you explain the concept of monopoly to people that only know a communist dictatorship way of life? How do you understand capitalism when the shelves at the store are bare? Natalia picked up on the concept and now wants to own a clothing store, but they can't get any goods, and you can't sell to people that have no money. Her mom, a little more suspect of the concept of monopoly and capitalism. All she knows is working for the government. So let's get into it. This is from my driver, Junior. He sold everything, got approved for parole to move to the United States, sold his house, sold his car, and then was denied entry and had to move back to Cuba with nothing. This is on his dash, probably 2017. There's a great spirit and understanding of Canada, United States, Cuba, working together. And we have to work together as a global group. So as they navigate uncertainty, we need to think about how could Cuba become one of the most attractive frontier markets in the Americas if U.S. sanctions are substantially reduced and domestic reforms accelerate. They've been under sanctions since the early 60s. Obviously, they don't work. There's a lack of medicine, a lack of food, a lack of electricity. There is no quality of life. Near-term opportunities center on tourism, food security, energy reliability, and telecommunications. They've received a lot of that through China and Asia, but with the U.S. taking over Venezuela, they lost an oil partner. With sanctions on oil, they have no oil for their electricity. Their grid, and I worked in the electric utility industry for 25 years, is diesel generation. It's a 60 or 70-year-old system that constantly fails. Telecommunications, they do have some internet and 4G. So there are some infrastructure opportunities on the horizon, and those would be very safe. But the total lack of food, they depend on imported food. When the Soviet Union fell in the early 90s, they lost a lot of support. Obviously, they've lost a lot of that recently with the loss of Venezuela, the sanctions. When countries like Mexico, Brazil, Vietnam donate 60 tons of rice that goes to the government and the military, they get first dibs. Then, instead of having it distributed, the free aid, the free supplies, those are sold by the government and the military to the people of Cuba. Not given, they're donated. However, the government and military profit. The long-term value creation depends on financial normalization, stronger property rights, and expanded private enterprise. Right now, if I sent money, let's just use $100 as a round number. If I send $100 US to Cuba, my family would receive 32 Cuban pesos for a dollar. If I use a carrier, so someone I know on WhatsApp, do a bank transfer and send them $100, they take 10% as a fee, and then they deliver the money right to my family's house. Except they give nearly 500 pesos to a dollar instead of 32 pesos to a dollar. So it's a astronomical difference using the black market and moving cash through secure sources as opposed to the bank or the government. Um, Investors should adopt a phased market entry strategy aligned to the policy milestones. And I would assume the milestones of the policy will change over time. So it is a moving target. But that's what I want to talk about today. So U.S. embargo limits investment, trade, financing, access to money, everything. The Helms-Burton Act creates legal risk tied to expropriated property claims. Like I said, Melia just shuttered their hotels. Everyone else in the world can travel to Cuba, but the United States, even though you can travel from the United States to Cuba. Um, they've been designated a state sponsor of terrorism. I've been in Cuba. I've been across the island 3 times. I've been in mountains. I've been all over. Um, there is limited military exposure. I really don't see how they are designated a state sponsor of terrorism when you have a country like Russia that is not. Domestic barriers include complex approvals, state ownership requirements, limited private sector participation. The government and military run everything. So looking at some market opening pathways, if things stay the same, which they might, at least through this year, the current sanctions remain in place and there's really limited opportunities. If for some reason the U.S. government lifts some of the sanctions, there could be expanded travel, banking, and trade. However, they have no jet fuel. So the flights are really just from the southern part of the U.S. Some of the international flights have been canceled. Others will go to Panama or other areas for refueling. But even in Spain, they've canceled the flights. Foreign direct investment, very limited. I mean, there could be some in the tourism and the infrastructure. If the embargo is lifted, then it depends on the Cuban domestic reforms and who's actually running the country. There is high growth frontier market across multiple sectors, definitely in the energy, telecommunications, and construction, and food. So looking at investment by sector, like I said, really the tourism and hospitality, renewable energy, telecom and digital is going to be high, short term, medium term. The logistics and ports, I think there would definitely be some enhancements initially. They're going to have to work to expand, being able to bring in much more product. Agriculture, definitely high now, and I would think that would consider even in the midterm. They have no food processing on the island. Um, they have no production except for being able to make beer or rum. There is no food production. There is some rice grown. There are coffee beans, but really limited agriculture, even though it's a robust island with a lot of space. Real estate, definitely for new construction, but again, it just depends on who owns the land and some of the rights. Definitely, there are some great opportunities in the tourism sector now. Those hotels are beautiful. Some are 4 and 5 star, just amazing. But new construction, as things open up, should be an opportunity. So definitely in the construction and real estate. So just understanding some of the investor personas, the Cuban diaspora, investors, small business, hospitality, housing, consumer services. There are a lot of small businesses there. Everyone's just trying to get by, selling whatever they can or making whatever they can. The infrastructure funds, energy, ports, water, transportation, telecommunications, huge, huge area. Strategic corporate investors, the manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, and tourism. I think there's a lot of folks in the United States lining up for that. And then looking at the private equity and venture capital, fintech would be ideal for companies like Wise or Revolut. The digital services, biotech, and agritech definitely needed. So, some milestones when you think of investments over the short, mid, and long term. For the short term, getting banking access restored. Their banks are, again, run by the government and military. The rates are distorted. They've tried to go to everyone has, again, because they rely on the folks that have left the country sending money back to the banks. It's a profitable area for the government to skim over 90% of the dollar. Having that fintech, having people like Wise, that would help. The private enterprise expansion, really the subject matter experts getting in, talking about development and franchising. However, that is a very unusual concept. They're entrepreneurial thinking, but not experienced in running their own substantial type business. Um, Travel restrictions need to be eased. That along goes with the fuel shortage and electricity. So hotels, resorts, tourism services can really expand. They had a wonderful tourism in the 2010 and beyond. They have premier resorts, but with the restrictions now and the lack of fuel, those have all really taken a huge nosedive. So that one is really has potential for growth. The currency reforms need to be initiated. The agriculture, consumer distribution, they do receive certain rations of food, but you will go to the location and different days of the week, different family members are entitled to certain um, food rations. However, they're not enough to feed a family. So definitely a lot in the agriculture and food would be critical. And the energy. China has done a lot with their solar, but they do need some storage and microgrids. They are suspect to some hurricanes. They do have an outdated grid. So really, the energy sector should have huge opportunities. And then medium term, again, just depends what happens with those property rights. Again, everything's owned by the government. Some families own their homes, have their homes, but understanding easements and open space, a lot to unravel there. The public-private partnerships hopefully will expand. The investments need to be in the utilities and transportation sector. The investment regulations need to be modernized, looking at manufacturing and logistics. They have a workforce, they just have nowhere to go and nothing to do. And then looking at those supply chains on a regional basis, export platforms, warehousing, they do export rum, coffee, cigars. They do have some infrastructure for air and sea, but really better understanding those supply chains and building those up. And then long term, really having some type of comprehensive US-Cuba normalization. I don't think that's been in place since probably 1958, 59. With that, you'll get the large-scale foreign direct investment. Integrating their financial system. It is quite difficult to navigate their system, and if you have a US credit card or debit card, you cannot use it in Cuba. It's different even with the European. So really making that banking capital market accessible is critical. The regional trade participation, I think there's a lot of products between Cuba and the US and Latin America. They do, like I said, have a workforce, so there could be some nearshore manufacturing. And then that whole advanced energy transition. They do have a lot of opportunities in the energy area, especially with hydrogen and clean exports, solar, and hopefully some storage. The microgrids will just keep them more functional in the future. And then just some leading indicators for you to monitor. Just, keep an eye on the removal of the U.S. state sponsor of terrorism list. That one's really a heavy duty um, sanction. The changes to the Helms-Burton Act really limit what they can do, the expansion of private property and being able to hire the currency system, the growth in foreign direct investment. They've had some. Canada's been a big partner, China, Spain, but with the sanctions, it's just really hard to move forward. So once that gets lifted, better things are on the way. And then just to leave you with a few recommendations, um, establish local relationships and monitor regulatory changes before any capital deployment. Like I mentioned, we do have two resources for you. One is definitely tied to some of those areas where you can get up to the date information. Prioritize some flexible investment structures and phased commitments. Again, don't go all in. Develop sector-specific market entry strategies aligned with sanctions and milestones. So again, kind of have a slow roll into that and evaluate your risk. And then focus on the infrastructure, energy, digital sectors that support the broader economic modernization. And I think, as I mentioned, the real estate, construction, and tourism are also there. So we've come to the end of the road, and this is in Cuba. Like the sign says, dangerous curves ahead, but there's plenty of beauty and grace to it. So let's open it up for some questions.
Outstanding. Very thoughtful. How many years have you been involved with Cuba?
Since 2017. So I've been to Cuba 8 times. I've driven across the island 3 times. I've been to the brewery. I've been in the coffee plantations in the mountains. I've been to the capital. Really absorbed everything I can across Cuba. And each city in Cuba definitely has its own personality. So if you're in Holguin, a city of parks and close to the beach and tourism, very different than Bayamo, very different than Santiago, very different than Havana. So they all have their beauty, um, but differences. And then depending where you are in the country, the further away you are from Havana, the less Havana gives you, it seems. So very different living quality of life in those communities as well.
Teresa, you have a question. Zooming in from Lisbon. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry if I missed it because couple of times I lost reception. But I guess I want to know, as an American, how do we go to Cuba? And what does that look like for an American going there?
It's quite easy. You buy a ticket. You typically fly out of like Miami, St. Petersburg, Houston. There were airports that are designated. Even though the government says there are restrictions, there really aren't any restrictions. The one word you cannot use is tourism. So if you said, I'm going, or my family and I are going to Cuba to go to the resort or on a vacation, you'll be denied exit or entry. So there is a list of available categories. So it can be for human aid, for research, there are specific categories, and you just use one of those. Because one of the main things is you cannot visit, they prohibit any personal or one-to-one contact. So I'm going over to see Jose and Maria. You can't do that, even though you will do that. So it's in the spirit of cultural understanding or research or
And so how
religion.
many Americans are going over there and do they believe whatever the reason is if it's not tourism?
Yeah, I guess as long as you say it's one of those select categories, and I can follow up with the list. I forgot that off the top of my head. Um, but as long as you use the same category coming and going, it's fine. It's
And then
very,
what do you do about currency if you said we cannot use our credit card there?
you have to stock up on the US side. So you have to take US dollars or euros. Um, and the bills need to be in absolutely perfect condition. If there's a slight tear, they will not accept that. So you'll have to convert money in Cuba, but when you do that, again, you're going to have to convert it on the street or typically at a restaurant where you'll get 500 pesos to $1. If you go to a bank, they'll give you 32 pesos for $1. So if you'd like the extra 470 pesos, which is significant, you got to find someone on the black market. There are also known sources that you just use WhatsApp and contact someone and do a transfer from, let's say, your US Wells Fargo account to their PayPal account or their Wells Fargo account. And then in Cuba, they deliver the money to you. So it's really creative. You have sanctions, but you have a lot of the systems operating. But
Okay.
if you run out of money in Cuba, you will not be able to get money unless someone wires it to you by, let's say, Western Union, if that is still an option.
Well, then my next follow-up question is, you said Malia is closing those resorts. What's happening with those resorts?
Right now, they're just being shuttered, so they'll be closed. Hopefully, they'll reopen when the U.S. takes its sanctions off Cuba and doesn't hurt the partners that trade with Cuba.
Were
So,
they owned by Malia or were
yes,
they okay?
yes, yeah. So there's been a lot of foreign investment from, like I said, Spain. They have a long history. They invaded Cuba. So Spain, China, Canada, definitely Canada for tourism. So because the U.S. keeps putting in heavier sanctions, now with the Helms-Burton Act, certain airlines can't fly, certain hotels can't operate, certain countries will be penalized or lose support from the U.S. if they interact with Cuba.
Hmm.
So that those sanctions need to be lifted.
And what do you think the probability of that is in, say, the next several years?
I was hopeful for this year. They did charge Raul Castro with crimes on May 20th, which was their Independence Day from the United States. Um, so I would anticipate some type of overthrow. The US, the CIA has met in Havana. They've had conversations with the government. The US has spoken to Raul's son. So I know there are ongoing negotiations. However, I don't know the outcome of those. So I would think Cuba is trying to navigate that. They are on their last straw. They have nothing. The people are revolting in the streets. I can vouch for that. Um, it depends on the U.S. appetite for invading another country. I'm not sure, when you look at what happened in Venezuela recently, I would anticipate a similar situation would happen like that in Cuba.
Hmm.
And then when you also think you have Marco Rubio, who has Cuban roots and was born in the United States as an immigrant, but his parents are Cuban, is that someone that would take ownership and run Cuba in some type of moderate function or in transition? So a lot to keep an eye on.
Thank you. Great questions, Teresa. Peter Grabeck.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon, evening, if anyone is joining us from later time zones. You can probably see the morning sun here in my back window. John, I wanted to thank you for your presentation and for giving us some insight on what is happening on the ground in Cuba at the moment. So my firm, we have a long history of public-private partnerships. My office is here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Um, my colleague who is actually overseeing our operations in Latin America was unable to. She had another engagement, and I tried to invite her to join us here. So I'm really just kind of taking notes for her benefit, and I wanted to kind of throw in what our organization can potentially do in Cuba, given specific scenarios which may or may not result. So, Uh, I work in trade and project finance. We do work in economic development projects. We work with, we specifically have relationships with both US Exim Bank and US DFC, which are the Export Credit Agency and Development Finance Institution that would likely, if there is a future scenario where the US is engaged in any development activity in Cuba, would be the apparatuses through which that activity would take place. So I just wanted to throw that out there that should such a scenario present itself, I'd be happy to speak to anyone who would be looking at viable projects. As you did point out, there's a highly underdeveloped economy there. There is, very little in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity building, bankability of projects outside of a well-structured and insulated external investment plan would be difficult. I think if you're trying to raise private capital, and my firm and I have a lot of experience in raising capital in developing countries and structuring and assisting and executing these projects. One of the areas that we can help in is due diligence, depending on how the post assuming there is some sort of change in trajectory scenario were to outline, especially with Cuba, there would be challenges in, who do you do business with down there, right? If it's the existing people that have existing institutional positions and capacity, we've seen how they operate, right? They take donations from Brazil and share the fat amongst themselves and then sell it to their people who don't have resources. The other side in Cuba, of course, is there may be diaspora that returns and has opportunities, and there's going to be complexity in all of those areas. So my firm would have the type of experience and capacity to conduct due diligence on structuring any broader engagement projects. And as I mentioned, we have relationships with DFC and XM. So should a scenario such as that present itself, anyone that is interested in doing projects with Cuba, we would be happy to participate in those conversations and potentially help in some stakeholder management opportunities. So that's probably all that I can really say on this one at the moment. Potentially even some things on banking reform. We have a lot of bankers and lawyers in our ranks. So if we do have the opportunity to work together in this type of use case, it would be great, but we'll see what happens. Thank you, though.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Martin Dimitrov, welcome. What question or thoughts do you have, please?
Yeah, so hey guys, and I appreciate the very informative, I would say, just presentation about Cuba because I think this is a very fortunate timing based on the fact that with my company and the whole entire trust holding group structure, we are very much rapidly expanding towards the Latin America side, starting currently with Brazil. We already have Colombia on our path with Panama and a few others. And I'm actually very interested when you mentioned, especially on the venture capital side and the private equity setups. Do we have an insight as to what are the current challenges that are the most difficult to overcome, whether it's governmental or non-governmental structuring of such funds to be expanded between European continental-based companies or partners towards Cuba, their interest levels, their kind of overall, I would say, gauging for their perspectives of expanding to investment side of things, and that's something that I'm very much looking into, kind of getting a little bit more, I would say, not just information, but also how we could potentially help to expand that and connect those bridges, whether it's diplomatic or not.
Yeah, I think you'd probably have to do some research with some of the current entities that are involved. So when you look at Spain or some of the businesses from Spain and Canada, how they navigate the way the government and military are currently set up. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
that will change in the future. So yeah, it depends the who is in charge, or what diaspora come back, what that looks like, and then with their banking system. So um, that's something definitely keep an eye on. I cannot firmly answer that, but I think gaining some experience from folks that have successfully navigated that, looking at some of the Canadian, Spanish entities would have some light there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, great question. But
yeah, because it's one of those things that I know it's a very favorable and unfortunately for the productive reasons, obviously, is quite undervalued in terms of a market. But from an opportunistic standpoint, there's a lot of talent that I've seen that comes from Cuba that is very well prepared in terms of market integrations to the current trends that are being looked into, especially when it comes to agriculture and prop tech. So it's a very interesting timing that you've just shown this, and I think Doug, I really appreciate you bringing the FDI forum together because this really does outline a few things that I was already in motion to think about. But this brings a very good light to all.
yeah. And then I also just want to remind people, I dropped in the chat just one good article on what the future of Cuba could look like. And then also another article or resource with really a lot of the different news and media and political sources. So you can keep an eye on all the moving parts. So just wanted to give you some background information there. But yeah,
Mhm.
great questions.
Jim
Yeah,
Huang is here as well. And Jim, I'm going to bet that you have been to Cuba and you certainly know about Cuba and some of the opportunities. Is that on your bucket list?
I missed the opportunity. I was supposed to go for an education trade mission right after our ARIA Miami meeting. I think it was John back in 2017, 18, right before, or right after they said no more tourism, but
Yeah.
you can go there for education purposes and others. But it was always on my bucket list. But thank you for giving us and Teresa for asking the question of how to get there now. But I do legitimately want to know the culture, see the opportunity, just as you were saying, Martin, in like I think they were talking about Colombia, Venezuela, right? As geopolitical things open up, opportunities galore. And I was just texting Doug behind the scene. This is what I wanted, right? Where we could go on the local tourism, but I think with the capital markets, finance, supply chain, different opportunities around the world is what I know Global Chamber can bring. But John, please share how we could see Cuba the right way without being held back and causing an international incident.
Well, I think we need to ask Doug, can we do a field trip? And let's all meet in Miami, and I will guide you through the island and take you to the coffee plantations and the cigar plantations and have you meet with government and business and other people across the island. So maybe that's something to put on the horizon. Right now, that definitely has to be tabled just because they have no resources, they have no food, they have no electricity. The timing is horrible. Things were bad before COVID. COVID put made a lot of things worse. And then with the increased sanctions and lack of fuel, this is not the time to go. And with the instability, and especially with the troop buildup in the Caribbean, things could change in minutes.
So John, one quick follow up. How about humanitarian? So if we went with Global Chamber, could we,
Oh, yes.
without trying to resell black market stuff, it's just trying to donate and give.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's a list of categories to it. Just the only word you don't want to use is tourism. So yeah, humanitarian aid, cultural, research. There are some specific categories. There's no problem. You can buy a ticket. Then the one thing you do have to do is usually buy a Cuban visa, which it's really just a stamp. It's a piece of paper. They essentially has two pieces. So they take one half when you enter the country and the other half when you leave. And it's just $100. Depending where you buy that Cuban visa, in Miami, it's $100. In Panama, it's 20. So it varies by your origination point, but that money just goes straight to the government.
Doug, set up on Latin America with you and Cesar. I know we could pick up Cesar in Colombia, so we could
Yep.
make the migration all the way down to maybe we go to Argentina when Messi and those guys win the World Cup.
There you go. That's a possibility. We do have an Argentinian delegation coming in, and so maybe we can coordinate with them. That would be amazing. Um, so, John, it sounds like you were hopeful for things to change this year, and so now it's just wait and see. This kind of the current environment is unpredictable, but it
Yeah.
sounds like there's some reason for optimism for something to change given how dire things are now.
Yes, I would think, yeah, there should be some change. You would think some type of positive change this year somehow, hopefully.
Okay.
But a
Is
lot of,
that
yeah, a lot of it depends on the Cuban government and how receptive they are, and then just depends on the tone and actions of the U.S. government. I don't know if there's many sanctions left, but they're trying to make things as difficult as possible, and people are dying. So hopefully that changes.
if I could ask each of you to give a closing comment? John, let's hear from you. What should we take away from this? And definitely, we're all in on a cultural mission, a research mission, nothing tourism oriented when the time is right.
Yeah, I think just take away an understanding of really um, trying to understand the Cuban people before you do anything. Uh, some have experienced freedom, some have not. Uh, some, all they know is hardship, and then it just gets worse and worse, and they continue to survive. So there's a brilliant soul. There's a peace and love. There's just the most amazing people you will find in Cuba. But trying to take some of our business concepts and other concepts be rather foreign. I mean, they have been isolated. The internet has obviously changed things, but just wonderful, humble, strong people.
Um, I would like to ask a question to John. You made a comment which caught my attention that the Cuban economy is sustained by the inflow of capital from Cubans in America.
Or around the world, yes.
I want to make a observation that I noticed when I went to Kaiser Permanente hospitals. Most of the hospitals of Kaiser Permanente are staffed by Filipino nurses. And it came to my attention that the Filipino medical community uh, gratefully sends to their parents about $15 billion annually. It's to sustain the Filipino economy. The parents receive so much income from their children who are medical doctors and nurses that they're able to buy a home or build a home in the Philippine Islands. And it seemed like the same kind of economic charisma is occurring between the Cubans in Florida are supporting the economy in Cuba. Is that correct?
Not exactly. The Cubans in Florida hate everything about Cuba for the most part. The money that comes back is trying to save their family, trying to feed their family. They're in survival mode. It's buying a solar generator so they can charge their cell phone. It's buying a solar fan so they can have some air when it's 90 degrees and 90 humidity. So the money that comes back is just to sustain families' basic low-level life. It's not for any huge investments.
Yeah, but the investment is happening and coming back, which is, I guess,
Right.
like
So it's for buying
survival.
clothes, for buying food, for buying
Yeah.
overpriced goods. The government profits. Like I said, if you send the money to the Cuban bank, they take 97% of it on the
Okay.
dollar.
So when
John,
things,
if you will forward your contact information to Doug Brunke, I would like to recommend that if you, on your next trip back to Cuba, I would like to forward through Doug Brunke $100 so that you could feed a family over there.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate that.
appreciate it. Thank you very much. As we wrap up, like to go to Jim Huang. Jim, you've been traveling. You've got a lot going on. This has been an important conversation here, and as you said, representative of the types of things that we like to do here, and will continue to do on a weekly basis. What closing comments do you have?
No, I just love the way the conversation's going. You know, when we organize from the economic development, really boots on the ground to find out what it is, what's going on. Obviously, many people I know with Global Chamber, we have that humanitarian, like to get to know people, wanting to give back, but also do some business. So this is really perfect. And for me, I'm going to Europe then China, and then I'm probably going to the Middle East before probably Latin America again because I have some stuff. So maybe, John, we find it. And I would say getting to know Cubans, I got to know them very well in Miami and New York. So a lot of friends, right? They go to those pockets. And some of my friends is, you just have to get out there, right? Not be afraid and not live in a bubble. So, Doug, I love how this real estate group, as many people said, it touches everything. It's the infrastructure for so many things. It allows quality of life. And I definitely see how Global Chamber is going to make a big impact with more and more of what we're creating and connecting people around the world together.
David Young would like to share an observation of
Wait,
how vibrant the Cuban people are.
hey, David, we need to move on because there's another
Okay,
event
I'm,
that's
I'm out.
starting right
I'm
now.
out.
Sorry about that. So we'll catch it next time. The event right now is Women in Global Leadership, and we've got a bunch of ladies who are on hold, and we're going to let them in. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, David. Thank you, John. Thank you, all of you, for participating today. Great conversation coming up in the coming weeks. All sorts of countries, and so get in all sorts of regions of the world where this triangle comes together: economic development, business, and real estate. Deals get made, and more will happen here. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, John.
You bet.